Well, hello, Miss. Welcome to video 2, all about preparing for parent-teacher conferences. We are focusing on the second part of what you and your team need to do, and that is knowing those weights. Those weights for grades, We want to know, is homework worth the same as a test? Or are there just a certain amount of points available in each class? We got to know that for your benefit, for your team's benefit, so that way you understand what your team's grade really is when you walk into parent-teacher conferences here in just a couple of weeks or even a few weeks, whatever it might be. Now, I want to know, I love asking questions, Mama, and today's question is, does your child have a weighted GPA? Are there weights in each class? Two different questions, but they are both related to weighted grades. Now, as always, I would love to talk to you and your teens one-on-one. Facebook's great, YouTube's great, but I really want to know you, really want to know your teen, and provide that personal support. So be sure to book a free consult at the end of the video. All right, so you've told me weighted GPA or weighted classes. I got to tell you, just up front, the weighted GPA, I know it's a thing. I know 4.0 just isn't 4.0. And depending on which part of the world you're in, 4.0 is not even a thing. It's like 6.0 or 9.0. I know there's all sorts of different systems out there. But I can also tell you there are things like 4.5 versus like 5.5. I don't know. There's all sorts of crazy things. So it's very important for you to know, mamas, and it's very important for your teens to know what is the school's system. Okay. And not only that, if your child's a high schooler thinking about college, or maybe you guys are already in middle school thinking about college, again, we got to know what's that college looking for, let alone what does the high school offer. Okay. And I can tell you from my personal experience at my high school, we had dual credit classes, which definitely did impact the GPA because certain classes are worth more. And then like AP is a whole nother thing. But my school, offered those classes, but they didn't impact GPA. So again, it depends on what the school offers, let alone what colleges your child's looking at. That makes a difference, okay? But that's not my focus for today when we're talking weighted GPAs, we're talking weights and grades. I want to focus more on how grades are distributed in each class, okay? I want to talk about, is a test worth homework? Is a test worth project? Is every class the same? Okay, really quick, before we jump into that, if you're just now joining us, thanks for being here. I'm Jessyka Coulter, CEO and founder of Ace Cookie Tutoring. I'm the CEO and founder of Ace Cookie Tutoring. I think I just said that. I'm so sorry. But I help students love to learn through study skills. And part of what can be kind of a problem area is if your child doesn't know how his grade really works. Okay, first we actually have to know how to learn to care about grades. But at the same time, if your child's like, man, I thought I had an A in the class, or woohoo, I thought I was doing really well, and then all of a sudden he looks at his grades and he's like, how am I failing? That sometimes is as simple as, how are the grades figured out in each class? Okay. Now, if you watched the other video, I meant to do one yesterday, so a couple days ago, I talked about a student that is a freshman in high school, and we looked at a syllabus, and we figured out the late work policy for every class. So definitely still recommend that if you and your kiddos haven't done that yet. But then we also need to have your teens look at the syllabus to figure out how the grades really work, okay? Some classes are really nice. At least I think they are, and really easy. And there's like 500 points available in the class. So it doesn't matter if your teen, bombs every test, as long as there's enough homework to even it out, okay? Might not get an A in that class, but could still pass, as long as, it's not like 500 points total and then like 300 from tests and 200 from homework. In that case, we still have to do pretty well in those tests, okay? So that's like totally unweighted. But I got to tell you, there are other classes, and this is getting more and more common, where tests are worth a lot of the grade, or like projects are worth a lot of your teen's grade. So that means 500 points in a class, but it doesn't matter now if it's a test or homework. It matters that your teen gets, say, like as many possible test points as possible, because that's going to weigh more than, say, his homework. That's only going to be like 10% of the final grade. Okay, so I can definitely, bring out some actual numbers. Probably should have figured some things ahead of time to walk it through a little better if you have questions. But do know that's something really important to be aware of. And the reason I point that out now before parent-teacher conferences is that student I was mentioning, the high school freshman. Well, he was aware that classes had different requirements, when it came to late work, and he knew grades were slightly different. But what he wasn't aware of is that one class tests were 60%, another class tests were 80%. That 60% class had projects, homework, and tests. The other class that was 80% tests didn't have projects. It just had 20% homework. So something I really, really want you and your teens to be aware of is how does the grade work? Now, we always have the question of learning versus grades. And I got to tell you, your teens who know how to learn, they're going to love to learn, which is going to automatically make a huge difference in the grades. But at the same time, unfortunately, it sometimes comes down to that point of, are we going to learn what we need to learn in order to get the grade that we need to pass or to get in that school or to, get in this other class to basically move on? And I know that's a whole other discussion we could definitely talk about during consultations or another separate video about it. But one of the things I will leave you with, and I know this might be kind of a surprise, a tutor saying this, but this is something I've walked through so many students, so many families with, and made sure my high school freshman I was working with the other day knew, is that unfortunately, if homework is only worth 20% of the grade, it's not as essential as preparing for the test. So when your teens say, why do I have to do the homework? Well, the answer is, yeah, it's not going to be a big difference on their grades. The 20% is still 20%. Okay. I mean, that could be a difference between an A and B very, very easily. Or if your child's right there on the border, it could be a big difference between a C and a D. Okay. And depending on high school versus college, we got to have those C's to, pass and move on because, generally C for credit in college most of the time and D for diploma, most of the time in high school. But the other thing is that homework is usually and hopefully always related to the test. If your child does the homework, then he knows what to expect on the test. If she does the homework, it's practice for the test. Now, when the homework has nothing to do with the test, then it starts to feel a little more pointless. But at the same time, the homework might feel easier than studying for the test. Okay, so definitely we want to be aware of the weights. We want to hopefully find out really quickly if your child hasn't had a test already. Hopefully it happens soon because we want to know what's the connection between the homework and the tests. And then with those projects, maybe your child does better on the project than the test. And in that case, then it's really awesome when the project is worth like 50% of the final grade, because that really can happen. I've had that myself personally in college classes towards, the end of my time in school. So at this point, I really, really want every one of you watching, I want all your teens to find that syllabus for every class, okay? There should be one online. There should be one in your child's backpack maybe, and if not, then that is a very good thing to bring up. Send an email, call the school, whatever it is, but obviously have your teen do it first. It's not your job, mamas. And know how those grades are figured, because sometimes it can be tricky online. I've had students that are like, okay, I've done all these things. Why does it show I'm failing? And it gets a little tricky. I feel like, especially like I've looked at Canvas and it has like those two sets of numbers. Sometimes it's like the weighted version versus the unweighted. And sometimes teachers have to go back and manually tweak things like at the end of semester, end of quarter. So definitely worth asking those kind of questions at parent-teacher conferences, as long as you're aware of where those grades really are coming from. Because your kiddo's doing badly on every test, then it's going to hurt the grade if the class is very test-based. And if your kiddo's not doing any homework, but it's one of those nicer classes where homework is a lot of the grade, or maybe it's one of those classes where attendance is a big part of the grade, because that happens too, or participation is, we got to know what the teacher's looking for in order for your kiddo to do well in school. So thank you for watching. This is just part 2. We've got a lot more coming at you to help you help your teens get ready for parent-teacher conferences, to make sure you know what those expectations are, how to make this an awesome school year. Hopefully your teen learns a lot, has a great year, and kind of has the grades and the learning to prove it. If you want your kiddos, teens to be amazed, you want your teen to be excited to be in school, you want to hear things like, wow, it's a pleasure to have your child in class and he's doing so well, book that consultation. Let's get some of those study skills in place that are going to make those grades, make that learning really awesome, no matter if it's 20% homework and 80% tests or some other combination. So thank you, mamas. Have a good night. See you for the next video tomorrow.